Hey, it's Christopher with Simple Septic Secrets, and I just finished up this awesome interview with my friend Ron. We talk about the time he spent with the civil rights movement and how he ended up at Martin Luther King Jr.'s house after he was assassinated, helping his family, taking his kids to the fair, and then so much more. It's a really awesome interview. Ron is someone that I met on a job a few years back, pumping his septic system, and we kind of just stayed in touch. But this interview is really awesome. We're barely even scratching the surface with all the amount of stories he has. I definitely want to have him back over for more. So let me know down below in the comments what you think.
In the town I lived in, I didn't know it at the time, but they had restrictive housing covenants that every homeowner had to sign with the real estate brokers when they bought their property. And it was a law. You sign it and then you had to stick by it. You couldn't sell your home when it's ready to sell. You couldn't sell it to Negroes. You couldn't sell it to Chinese or Japanese. You couldn't sell it to Mexicans. You couldn't sell it to Filipinos. You couldn't sell it to anybody who was not white.
Oh, and that was like as far as the bank, like in the contract or something, or
That was California law. And in our town, we lived in a town where that all got changed.
right? Yeah, now it's not there, but
They got wiped out actually, it didn't get wiped out until I was in my first year of high school. And that was terrible times in this country. But the whole country was that way. It wasn't just our town. Racism was really predominant in the United States. Uh, Slavery still existed in many places, even though it 1776 or something was the founding of our country, and I can't remember when it was 18 something when the uh,
Civil War.
slavery Civil War ended, but there was still racism all the time. Anyway, we had one black student at my high school, and I'm sure he had other friends. I never met any of them at my high school. He was on the track team that I was on, but I would sit with him in the cafeteria, and our cafeteria was crowded. But the table we sat at never had anyone sitting at it. It was just him and me sitting across from each other, room for about 20 other kids at the table, 10 on each side. Nobody would sit there. That's how bad racism was in our community.
Oh wow.
And I got a lot of things happen to me. They'd leave stink bombs in my school locker and stuff
Oh, because you were friends with
because I was friends with a Negro,
oh.
and they were called at that time. Black, the term black people didn't even exist. That came around many years later. I think I was in college by the time that became a common term. And I didn't understand it. I also, probably because of the way I was raised, but I didn't know it. I wasn't doing what I do. I wasn't living the way I live because of anything. I didn't have some strong beliefs that I had to like black people. He was just a nice guy. He ran track with me, and I liked him, so I'd sit with him because he was alone. I also would we had two or three retarded kids in our high school, and their parents wanted them to be in the regular high school, and I found myself, the ones I remember were both girls, but we had several. But I was also one of the only people in the school that would sit at lunch tables with them or talk to them in the hallways and things like that. Other people would pull their hair and make fun of them and call them they had one of the girls that was retarded had thick glasses, and they'd call her Four Eyes and stuff like that. Any kid that had glasses, kids are so cruel to each other, and they still are today. Uh, Children today are committing suicide because they get on these telephone conversations, and it's called
Social media.
social media, and a lot of teenage girls, for instance, will start picking on one girl, and she's perfectly okay. She's just different from some of them. They're the more popular girls in school, and they pick on her so bad she goes home and commits suicide, and that's happening all the time. We still don't have a grip on that in our country. In the 20th century or 21st century, we still can't seem to teach our young people to, well, they get it from their parents.
It's worse now, actually, I think.
It probably is. And their parents are the same way. And that's why I don't have a television, why I don't listen to popular music and stuff, because the lyrics in half the popular songs have things in the lyrics that I don't mind. If the entertainer is a good singer, there's no reason they have to sing songs that express racism, sexism, you know, anti-Semitic thoughts. Things. Songs don't have to represent the worst in humanity, so I don't choose to listen to them. And then to popularize them and get young people to listen to them, they grow up listening to this stuff and they think it's normal. Some do, who haven't learned to think for themselves. Okay.
So if you went back to like you were high school and you would hang out with the black kids and the
Well,
retarded kids and like
I didn't hang out with them, but I would associate with them when it was appropriate. Like if it's lunch and he's sitting alone, I would go sit with him. Or if I was walking down the halls and everybody's spreading and going around a person that you can tell they're distressed because nobody wants to be close to them, I would stop and chat with them or walk the rest of the way down the hall or carry their books for them, the girls. I'd say, let me carry your books. I would try to be kind, and that made them feel good. And of course, then they would, when they'd see me, they'd come talk to me.
right.
And what I didn't realize was I was making friends by being a friend. That's what I tell people now. If you're lonely or you think you need something, figure out someone else that maybe needs the same thing and go make their friendship. Now there's two of you and you can fill each other's needs. It's a simple, free solution to a lot of our problems. Anyhow, beginnings of my experience.
Okay, I got you.
My beginnings of my experience of, I'm not going to say racial discrimination, all sorts of discrimination. Discrimination against people that have mental illness, discrimination of people that aren't a race that you are, discrimination against people who have different religions, who have different politics. Discrimination. I learned it early. And the older I got, I was active in my church youth groups and stuff. I developed values that said, this is not right. It's not right on all sorts of levels. So it was kind of natural when the civil rights movement got started. I was college age. I was working in I got part of my story ahead of itself here. This is part of my memory loss thing. I did end up going with this clergyman man I told you about, J. Richard Friedline, a disciple of Christ. That was the denomination's name. It was just a Protestant church in Hayward. I went with him and some other clergymen to Selma, Alabama, and that's interesting. That's where Martin Luther King first took on national prominence. He was the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. They were reacting to the fact that a black woman, and for the life of me, she's famous, she wouldn't do what all black people had to do, which was sit in the rear of the bus.
Rosa Parks?
Rosa Parks. She wouldn't sit in the rear of the bus. She sat down at the front of the bus. The bus drivers wouldn't drive the bus. So she sat there and the police came and hauled her off the bus, and that became national news. That was the beginning of SCLC's whatever, and within a few months, they had a march, black people primarily, but people who supported the cause of equal rights for black people, marched across the famous bridge, the word Pettus, something E. Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, I believe it was, and they got turned back. The Alabama National Guard and horseback riders that had cattle prods, and these cattle prods, and these had high voltage, and they would jab them in the black people and electrocute them, and they killed a couple of people that had heart conditions. It's like stun guns are today. And they turned the crowd back, and Martin Luther King put out a call nationwide, and thousands of people from labor unions, from college campuses, from church groups throughout the country, all sorts of people showed up. And that's how the civil rights movement really took big, and I was involved in that. So this J. Richard Friedline clergyman that I knew organized a group of clergymen in our community. And my twin brother and I owned a station wagon, and they needed drivers to pick up these clergymen from their different locations and drive them so they didn't have to take their own cars and leave them parked at the San Francisco airport.
Okay.
We acted like limousines, and there were 4 or 5 volunteers. I was just one of the volunteers, and my brother was in the car with me because he wanted to ride along. We weren't going to go back there. In fact, the call was put out for clergymen. So we had 8 or 10 clergymen. I had 5 in my car, and someone had 5 or 6 in their car. We got to the San Francisco airport. We were all standing together in the parking lot, and they were counting up the money they had to buy airplane tickets. And it turned out they had enough extra money, and they also took some spending money, so when they were there, they could buy food and stuff. They had enough extra money, and several of those clergymen knew me because I was very active in the youth movement. I was the president of the United Christian Youth Movement, which was a combination of about 60 different Protestant churches in our whole geographic area in the East Bay, of the youth group. And that was my senior year in high school, and I was the president of that group. And they knew me, and Dick said, "Ron, we have enough extra money to buy another plane ticket. Would you like to go with us?" I said, "Wow, I didn't bring any." Everybody had a little overnight bag with at least another pair of underwear and socks and stuff, toothbrush. He said, "Don't worry about it. Here, I'll give you a pair of my extra pair of my socks, and we'll just, if you want to come, let your brother drive your car back home." So he took my car back home, and I went with him. That's how I ended up going. And I didn't have anything. These guys all had, and most of them came. They were there for 2 or 3 days, and then they came back to California. Mm-hmm. I ended up staying the entire summer because once you get there, the black families in that community and the black churches found you housing, they fed you, and I was free, and it was exciting. And that's how I met Martin Luther King. He was leading that organization. So I spent the summer doing that kind of basically voter registration, registering black people to get the right to vote.
Okay.
And got arrested several times, and those are all individual stories that could go on. I could talk for a week.
Was there any like violence and stuff like that you were in?
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
were you like,
absolutely.
Riots with the police and
well,
stuff like
they
that?
weren't riots. They were the police. Remember, Dr. Martin Luther King led a nonviolent movement. So none of our people, none of us in the movement were violent, but we wouldn't disperse when they would order us to disperse. So then they would run at us with their horses and their cattle prods. They would beat us with their billy clubs and crack our skulls and put us in the hospital.
So would they go after the white people also, and whoever's in that group, basically?
Anybody in that group. In fact, they hated white college students and stuff like that were called outside agitators, and they were hated even more than the black people, because in the white people's minds, the bigots in the South, the black people weren't human. They were subhuman, and they were subservient, and they knew their place, and they didn't speak out until Martin Luther King organized them. But the white people came, and the white people, absolutely. We had power. We had labor unions on our side. We had money. The national news media came because of us. By us, I mean the white people that were not. So they hated us and everything we represented. And so I got beaten up even worse than some of the black people did. Anyway, that was how I met Martin Luther King. And then come back to California, get involved in things here. I became part owner of a hippie cab company in Berkeley, California called Taxi Unlimited. The drivers were part owners. That's an interesting story. Look, I want to write that down for later. That's another whole tale. And as a conscientious objector, I was trying to find something that my draft board would approve for my 2 years of mandatory military service. I registered for the draft. I classified 1A, which meant I was qualified to be a military person. I turned that classification down and said I'd rather go to jail than have to go kill people. so they were in the process of trying to get me to go to jail. When they did, the draft board did finally find a job for me as an elevator operator in the Veterans Memorial Hospital in Livermore. And since it was a veterans hospital, I kind of stretched whatever. In other words, and I didn't get paid. I had to do it voluntarily.
But is either that or jail?
It was that was to do my military service. Yeah, well, yeah,
Or go fight in the war, right? Like,
or yeah, I had the choice of going ahead and letting them train me to be a military person, or I could do that as a conscientious objector. So I did get the status of conscientious. Well, no, I didn't. I didn't get the status of conscientious objector, but I was given a deferment from active military service. That was active military service, but my assignment would be stateside. I wouldn't have to go I didn't have to go through basic training and learn to use a rifle or follow it. I just operated an elevator. But it was a 5-year. See, to punish me, I had to do 5 years of that instead of 2 years in the service. And I was willing to do that. But I had started doing that, and oh, that's right. The way the law was written, and still is, I had to find jobs, submit them to my draft board, and it was a paper process. Mm-hmm. It might take 6 weeks to a month to 6 months, and they would either approve it or not approve it. Well, they ended up, after I worked there for 6 months, they didn't approve it.
After 6 months?
It took them that long to process the paperwork. And, they're dragging their feet. They're not in any rush. In the meantime, I'm not going to college, which I should have been doing, but I kept not going to college because you can't go to school and also do your draft service. So I started the process over, and I got another job that I thought could qualify. I worked for I don't know who was paying the money, but it was in the early stages of us developing space technology, and they had to develop diets that astronauts in space could eat while they're in space so they wouldn't fart methane.
Right.
In your normal farts, there's methane in most people's normal farts. Methane would take a ton of equipment to filter it out of the air in order to make it breathable inside the spaceship. All the other gases that your body secretes when you fart or sweat or breathe out of your breath, all the other things that are toxic can be filtered very easily just with filters that only weigh 2 or 3 pounds. But it would take a ton of stuff to filter methane because methane was a unique. Right. So I'm in an experimental thing. I was a volunteer at the University of California in Berkeley in the nutrition department, and a couple of the professors there were feeding us different kinds of seaweed and things like that, stuff that would not create methane, and they were developing that. And right in the middle of that, that was a several weeks project. My draft board hadn't approved that either, but you have to work at it, and then you submit it. And I was still waiting for my draft board to approve it when Martin Luther King was assassinated.
So are they measuring your farts, or are they like?
Yes. Oh yeah. In fact, one of my jobs in that program was we had a thing just like a sealed chamber that was like the inside of a spaceship. It didn't have all the other equipment in it, but it had airlocks and everything. And we put 3 or 4 guys in there, and they had to live in there for a month. And food was packed.
That's terrible.
Well, the food was it's the food the astronauts would be eating, so it was nutritional. And eventually, that program did eventually develop food that astronauts could. Nobody.
What about when you go to the bathroom? Because there's methane in the species also.
Yeah,
right?
well, there is if you're eating food that produces methane. But
so you could have a diet that you don't produce methane at all.
No methane in your body at all.
Would that be more of a vegan kind of diet, or like plant-based, or?
I don't know. I mean.
Yeah, you didn't get that far into it.
Well, yeah, we were guinea pigs, but we didn't have the knowledge, the chemistry training.
You just ate whatever they gave you, basically, or did whatever.
Yeah, we did all sorts of different protocols, and they collected all of our bowel movements and our urine, and they analyzed it, and it was my job each afternoon. Carnation Ice Cream Company donated to help the space program. They donated 1 gallon buckets that they put ice cream in with a lid and keep in freezers. Do with the cardboard buckets. They had thousands of them, and they donated the empty buckets
Oh, okay.
to our program to collect the these were all boys, by the way. There were
Right.
no girls in this. Now astronauts can be women now, but they collected their bowel movements in these buckets, and then they kept them in the freezer and they analyzed them and stuff. But when they were done after a week or two, it was my job every day to take 20 or 30 of these buckets, put them on a cart, and push them across the campus from the nutrition department, take them down the elevator to the ground floor, push this cart full of frozen buckets of
Feces.
turds across campus to the incinerator, which happened to be located in the backyard of the college president's house. They have maybe not the president, chancellor, whatever, the guy that's the head of UC Berkeley, and he's clear over on the north side of campus, and the nutrition department was on the southwest side. But anyway, it took 20 minutes to push this heavy cart across the campus to the incinerator, and I had done that 2 or 3 different days. And on one of those days, as I'm pushing it across, here comes 4 or 5. They might have been high school kids, they might have been college students, but they were older boys with nothing better to do. They were riding their bicycles, and they saw all these carnation ice cream things, and they all have frost on them because they've been in the freezer, so they're sweating. And they said, "Hey, what do you got there?" I don't know what made me do it. It's just me. I said, "Ice cream. I'm taking it." Oh, okay. Let's call the guy President Smith. I didn't.
Right.
And he wasn't President Smith. He was Chancellor Smith. But anyway, I'm taking it over to Chancellor Smith's house. They're having a faculty party there this afternoon, or a barbecue or something. And they believed that, and they said, hey, God, you got 50 or 60 of those things. They wouldn't miss one. Give us one. And my brain said, shit, I know what I'm not doing. I'm not taking them to the president, so sure. Right. I said, yeah, but hey, man, I don't want to lose my job. Listen, I'll give it to you, but take it and get out of here. Don't open it here. Please, get it off campus before you open it. So they head out, they take it, they're all thrilled. They're going to go get spoons or something to eat it with. They're riding away on their bicycles. I push the cart like hell over to the incinerator. I throw all this stuff in the incinerator, and I didn't even take the cart back. I left the cart there. This is before cell phones. I had no way to communicate. So I actually left the campus and took the city streets. I ran. I was young and I could run. I ran a couple blocks away from the college. I ran completely around the college on the side. I knew they were headed toward the southeast side of campus. So I went around the northwest side of campus and came back to the nutrition department, went upstairs, and I'm panting, and the people in the, oh, wait a minute. Yes, yeah. I went upstairs to where this experiment was going on, and I told my faculty advisor, I said, I'm going to get killed. Why? And I told him what I did, and I thought I was in trouble. He thought that was funny. And he says, so what do you? I said, don't send me across the campus with those things anymore, because I'll get, these guys they're going to look for me tomorrow. So they had to have one of the other guys push them. And so they weren't looking for the other guy, they were looking for me. Anyway, that's
a great story.
Yes. I would love to have seen their face with that and found it was full of turds.
So was it like just one turd, or is it like filled like?
Oh, it's filled. The buckets, it was heavy.
Oh.
These are 1 gallon ice cream buckets.
That's why it was so heavy, because they're all full of turds and you're pushing them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they're all perspiring because it's a hot day, and they're frozen cold, and there's frost on the outside of them. These guys.
Well, you know what's funny about it? When you first open it, it's not going to smell if it's frozen.
Oh, yeah. No.
It won't be till it starts to thaw.
Well, but they're going to see what it is.
Yeah, they'll see it, yeah.
What the hell? And then they're going to realize what I did, and then they're going to, I would suspect they came back on campus and spent the rest of the day looking for me. I'll never know how that ended. Now, why did I even diverge on that?
Oh, we were talking about, you're the conscientious objector.
I'm in that program, and Martin Luther King gets assassinated. I hear about it on the news. And because I already had met him earlier, I just decided that I hadn't got my draft board's approval yet anyway. So if I quit working somewhere that I haven't been approved for, it's not like I'm a draft dodger.
Right.
I'm just have a job, and now I've lost a job. I'm still going to have to come up with one. So I think I'm just good. I went and told my faculty boss. I said, I'm sorry. I did some voter registration for Martin Luther King's organization a couple years ago. Now that he was killed, I'd like to go back and go to his funeral and stuff like that. And he said, well, how much time you want off? And I said, I don't know. I was thinking about just quitting. He says, I'll tell you what, don't quit. Stay as long as you need to stay. I'll cover for you. And when you come back, all I want you to do is come to all my graduate classes and tell them what the civil rights movement was like. Turns out he's a real strong pro advocate for racial integration. and he had what do they call it? He was already a professor emeritus for life. They can't kick him out. So, and he said, this is, you don't have to advertise this. You don't tell anyone. Come back and talk to my classes. Well, when I came back after a month and talked to his classes, then other professors, UC Berkeley is pretty progressive.
Right.
Other professors, so I spent the rest of that school year just visiting graduate classes and talking to their students, because they all had questions. What was working in the, what was this like? And a whole lot of them, over the years, I kept in touch with some of those people I met in those classes. They became lawyers, they became civil rights workers, they became community organizers, they became all the kinds of things. And part of them said that they were influenced by my reporting on what had happened to me in the civil rights movement. So
you had an effect on all those people.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to diverge here for a second, because this is something that it's a thread through all of the experiences I'm going to be sharing with you. In my life of 82 years, since let's say around junior high school, I've been at the right place at the right time for something to happen that has been way out of the usual. It's not what kids when you're 9 years old or 10 years old, you have a life. I had unusual things happen to me. I got something out of order here, but at any rate, let's get it back in order. I go back to, I wanted to see where he was when he got shot. So I'm on an airplane. I'm going to visit my mom and dad in Florida. They haven't come back to California yet. I take a flight to Atlanta Airport, and then there's a 2.5 hour layover before the next flight takes off and goes to Miami, where I needed to fly to. So during those 2 hours, I hitchhiked into downtown, I think it was Atlanta. What city was he in when he got shot and killed in the Lorraine Hotel?
I don't know.
Well,
I could look it up.
But it doesn't matter. The people that are listening can look it up too. It was my intention to hitchhike up into town to see where the hotel was that he was on the second floor story when he got shot. And I'm hitchhiking, and these two men pick me up, and they asked me where I had long hair. I'm a Berkeley hippie, remember. I tell them I'm hitchhiking into town, but I just had the gut level feeling I shouldn't tell them why, because they're white. This is a town that's in the South. I remembered my previous experiences. So I said, I just want to do some sightseeing, and my plane doesn't take off for a couple hours. He said, what do you do in Berkeley? And I also told a fib. I said, I'm a taxi cab driver. And he said, you're not one of those goddamn hippies, are you? I said, no, sir. And I'm thinking, okay, I can tell where this is going.
Right.
And they said, because if you are, or you're one of those they use a lot of foul language, but you're one of those goddamn outside agitators, aren't you? And I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never met a black person. Whatever. I lied my head off. And it probably saved my life, because they probably would have never taken me into town. They would have driven me out of town and shot me or something.
Right.
Or beat me to death.
And back then, you can get away with stuff like that.
Absolutely. Anyway, I ended up somehow I've got the two towns. The town he was shot in is not the town he lived in, and I can't remember now how it was I ended up in the town he lived in. And I don't even remember if it was that same trip. It might have been at a later date because it was after his funeral was over. Anyway, I was on the sidewalk in front of the national headquarters for Dr. Martin Luther King's movement, which was called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And it had offices, but there were only 5 or 6 men, all clergymen, who were on his staff. So it was a small office building. But I was going there, and I had just gotten ready to go inside when a little black child came running, about 7, 8 years old, came running down the sidewalk, and both of his the shoestrings on both of his tennis shoes were untied, and he was just running along. And I got down on my knee, and as he came by, I put my arm out and I said, "Oh, buddy, let me tie your shoes. You're going to fall down." And he says, "Please don't hurt me, mister." I'm white, he's black.
All right.
And Dr. King has just been murdered 2 days earlier, or whatever it was. That's why I was there.
Right.
So I tie his shoestrings, spat him on the butt, and he goes running down the street. And he's really happy that I wasn't going to hurt him.
Right.
And I went to stand up, and I couldn't. I couldn't stand up because somebody behind me had put both of their hands on my shoulders from behind and was holding me down. And it was a strong person. And I hear this voice that says, "Hey, boy, where you from?" It was a black man. And then he released his hold, and I stood up, and I started crying because I thought, "Oh, I'm going to get, I'm white."
Yeah.
And he didn't. All he saw me do was pat that little black kid on the butt. Oh God, I was a friendly pat. Because that's what's going through my mind.
Right.
What I didn't realize was he had seen the whole thing. He saw me stop the kid, saw me tie his shoes, saw me calm him down and tell him I'm not going to hurt him, and send him on his way. He was proud of that, but he didn't. I didn't know that.
Right.
So I turn around, and his name is James Orange. The reason I mention that name is because James Orange was one of the top lieutenants if you talked in military terms, top lieutenants in Dr. Martin Luther King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And he was at a staff meeting inside, and he had come outside to smoke a cigarette or something. And he saw what I did. And he says, he has a big grin on his face. And then he gives me a big bear hug. He practically crushed me. I mean, he's huge. He's like 350 pounds, and I was a little skinny 170-pound track star, So James Orange says, after he gives me this big bear hug, and I said, "Oh, he practically crushed me." He has a big grin. He asked me where I'm from. I said, "I'm a hippie cab driver in Berkeley." He says, "Oh, you can read a map?" And I said, "Yes." We didn't have cell phones and
Right.
GPS. I said, "Of course I can. I read map books." And he said, "If I give you these car keys," and he takes them off his belt, he has them on a hook on his belt. He's got a ring with about 12 keys on it. He said, "If I give you these keys," he said, "this one here is the ignition key for that hearse across the street." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can you see that it's full up?" I said, "What is it, dead bodies?" And he says, "No." I was joking. It was mailbags. In 2 days, so many thousands of people had sent telegrams and letters and stuff to Dr. King, and they all came to the SCLC offices because people around the world didn't know his address, so they just went Dr. Martin Luther King, Atlanta, Georgia, or whatever.
Right.
So they all ended up there. The post office didn't have enough mail carriers to take mail out to her house every day, so they brought them all there and loaded them in that hearse, but it was full, and they needed to get it over to Dr. King's house. And remember, he's just died. There are so many important people, like from the news magazines and the newspapers and the television stations. There weren't that many TV stations in those days, but so many people were coming to their offices, and congressmen and people were coming. They didn't have time to have one of their drivers drive that hearse over to her house. So he gives me a map, he gives me the keys, and I said, "You don't even know me. How can you trust me to do that? What if I stole the car?" He says, "Ron," I already told him what my name was. He says, "Ron, I knew as soon as I saw you tying that little kid's shoes, I knew I could trust you." See, no, here again, I was at the right place at the right time who else could have had something like that happen? So I take him over to Dr. King's house, and when I get there, he says, just ask Mrs. King, and her name is Coretta. Just ask Coretta where she wants them. And so I did, and I went. They already had. Who was our president at that time? Was it Kennedy?
I'm not sure.
I think it might have been John F.
Might have been Kennedy.
I think Kennedy had already assigned 2 Secret Servicemen to be with her and her family, because at that time they didn't know where the killer was, or how many,
Right.
whether it was a whole group of people or one person had shot. So they were assigned to be with her and the kids all the time. So when I got there, he checked my ID and everything, and all I had was a driver's license, but he checked that, held me for about 20 minutes, and when he was all done, he says, "Whoa, you have an interesting life, Mr. Eastwood." And I said, "No, I'm just a cab driver." He said, "Oh, well, we talked to your school teachers from grade school, high school, your minister at your church, a couple other ministers who said you're active in the whole community. You're president of a youth movement in your town. They knew, in 20 minutes, they knew more about me than I could even remember about myself. That just shows you how much information our government can get its hands on if it wants to.
Yeah, and that was back before the internet, and they're spying and listening to all
This was
stuff.
all done by telephone.
Right.
But the FBI, or who, I don't even know who the Secret Service is.
It probably would have been Secret Service, right? Most likely.
They said, I knew they were Secret
Oh,
Service,
okay.
but I don't know who their answer to. Who would have been doing, maybe they just have an office that did
Yeah.
it. Somehow they had access to that information about me. So before I even got to take the mailbags into her, and then they got a couple other volunteers. There were lots of community people who kept bringing food over to her house. There was a constant string of cars stopping out front, and guys would drive their cars up, and they'd send their kids in with a casserole for dinner, a pie for dinner. But the point is, she's one woman with 3 kids. She had food to feed an army. It was arriving all the time. And she had a housekeeper, a little Negro lady that weighed about 90 pounds, about 60 years old, and it was her housekeeper who normally just helped. And when I took the first bag of mail in the kitchen, I went around and took them up the steps to the back porch and into the kitchen. And I had to drag them through the kitchen to get down to the hallway to take them down to Dr. King's study. That's where they wanted them. By the time I was done, for the 2 days I delivered those things, his study, which was a 20-foot by 20-foot room with a desk in it, was stacked floor to ceiling. There was no more room. All those bags of mail were there.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know how they dealt with them. I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm sure they had to get people to move them somewhere. But the first bag I brought in, I see this little black lady. She's standing over in front of the kitchen sink. Dishes. The food had been eaten, and they're empty, dirty dishes were piling up on the kitchen counter. And she was standing in front of it, and she was trembling, and she was crying. And I came over and I put my arms around her. I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No, I'm too old to do this. Look at this. I can't do this anymore." And she really broke down and started crying. And I helped her into the living room, and Mrs. King was in there being interviewed by Collier's magazine. And she interrupted her interview and said, "What's wrong, Ron?" And I said, "She needs help. Would you mind if I stay and help her?" "Oh, it would be a blessing." And I said, "Look, you sit down here and relax." I sat her down on the sofa, and she thanked me, and I went out to the kitchen. I spent the next 5 or 6 hours washing dishes and stacking these things. And then Mrs. King would check on me every once in a while. And during the time I was there, Harry Belafonte, do you know who he was?
Mm-hmm.
Harry Belafonte is a famous singer. I think he's still alive, and an activist. They're not biting me. He showed up, and so he started helping me wash dishes.
That is, yeah.
Okay. If Dolly Parton showed up somewhere and said, "Oh, let me help wash dishes," that's how Harry Belafonte shows up, and he is world famous, and he's washing dishes beside me in Mrs. King's kitchen. And we washed dishes until midnight, and I was exhausted.
That is a lot of dishes.
Well, and then Harry and it's, I don't want to go through all the details and bore people. We got other people to volunteer to come, and then I rode with different people. And as the food came, and a lot of it needed to be refrigerated, we set up a schedule. And by the way, I never, I never took the hearse back to the office. We called the office and said, "Look, Mrs. King needs help here. Can someone else come over and pick up the hearse?" They said, "No, no, keep it." Um, and I said, "Can we use it to take all this extra food she's getting and deliver it to," today they would call them food banks, but we were delivering it to places where people could get food that needed it, to senior centers where elderly people needed food, and hospitals. And so we spent most of the rest of that month just delivering all the food that was coming. And we kept telling people, "Don't bring any more food. We got more than we need." And we delivered it to all the hospitals and all the different places. So I spent the summer, and I slept at her house on an army cot that the Secret Service got from somewhere in her garage. So I lived in her garage the rest of that summer, and and I took the kids with a Secret Service agent with us, and the three kids, and we took them to the circus. Now, her kids, nobody knows what her kids look like. So it's safe to go into a circus where there's thousands of people. Nobody knows me. They don't know her kids. The Secret Service man was dressed in plain clothes, had a gun and a walkie-talkie. I mean, he had a thing he could talk in, but
But they knew what she looked like. That's why she didn't come.
it wasn't that she wanted to go to the circus. She's too busy.
Oh, right.
Remember, her husband is world famous. Just like when Robert Kennedy was killed, Jackie Onassis didn't have a private life. She had to deal with with other people. Mrs. King, one night one evening, I'd been sitting in the bedroom with Harry Belafonte, and he was telling Marty. Marty was Martin Luther King III. That was Dr. King's son.
Okay.
And he was a young boy. He was 10 or 12 years old. Harry Belafonte was sitting on the bed, two sisters, Benita and can't remember the other one's name. They were bunk beds, and the two girls were sitting on the lower bunk on one side of the bedroom. Harry Belafonte was on the other side of the bedroom. Marty was up the other place, and I was standing in the doorway, and he was asking questions, and they called him Uncle Harry. He wasn't their uncle. Marty the third said, "Uncle Harry, Daddy wouldn't have wanted us to hate the man that killed him, would he?" And that made me start crying. I thought, wow, 10-year-old kid, that's pretty powerful. Most of the 10-year-olds would hate someone that killed their dad.
Oh, definitely.
But that little kid already had an understanding. And Harry Belafonte said, "You're absolutely right. And it's because of children like you are going to grow up and remember your dad." And I thought that was so powerful. And I've never forgotten that night. And it still brings back, obviously, I'm still emotional about how that happened. That was so profound. And it was so incredible that I got to be there for that. I remember on the King family's kitchen wall over the dining room, they called it the dinette. On the dinette table, on the wall, there was a plaque with a heart like that. And I don't know if it was two clasp hands, but anyway, there were two. Here's this heart, and there are these two circles, and they cross over. There's a term for them. I think they call them Venn diagrams.
Oh, yeah. It's like a infinite. Yeah, they go over each other, right? Like two circles that are like going.
Okay. It's one of them was. Well, I can't remember. The point of it was where they cross. It says, so it goes. I wish I could remember the poem. It's a poem that some famous poet wrote this poem, but it's become classic. It's like hate and anger and stuff is over here, and God and good things and positive stuff is over here. And he says, uh, and love, that's the heart that's around the whole, and love, the result of those two things merging is love always prevails. It
It
was
like connects the two, like
connect.
the two extremes, and the love's in the middle,
Well, it
basically.
connects it, but it wipes out any bad influence that the bad side would have gets wiped out when it's met by the good side.
Oh, gotcha.
Maybe love was on this side and hate was. I think it was love and hate. Uh, Hate did so and so to you. Love draws you in and eliminates the hate. Anyway, that was a thing that and that was a little kind of a prayer that the family always said before meals. They read that. It was kind of a thing. So the kids grew up with that kind of moral teaching.
Right.
And I thought that was, I've got it at home. I just can't remember it. um,
That you are right about the synchronicities though. Like that one little thing tying the kid's shoe, which led to this and
oh,
that and this and that, and like you're basically like in their household at some of the most intimate moments of like in history,
oh yeah.
right? Like where there's no cameras there, there's no nothing. I mean, there's really just a couple people inside their house. I mean, other than the kids, like no one would even have experienced the different like memories and moments that you saw there.
Yeah. Uh, and speaking of things on the wall, I have a thing I keep. I think it's taped to my microwave right now. I move it around, but a kid that was in high school, and he wrote it and gave it to me. It says, "Be realistic. Expect a miracle." Be realistic. Expect a miracle. And I kind of live by that, because the reality I live in, I have little miracles happening every day. I mean, I ran into you, and now I'm sitting here talking to you,
Right.
and you're a really neat person that I am glad I met. But it wouldn't have happened had I not had a septic tank plugged up.
That's true.
And people, people that things that happen in people's lives seem to be synchronistic, but usually, if you keep an open mind and try to pay attention to everything that's going on around you, don't walk past anything. Um, and I want to diverge. By the way, as I tell these stories, they're all full of the kinds of things I'm going to diverge and talk about right now. So you're going to have to get me back to Dr. King, because that's our topic. But um, I was at a seminar, a personal development seminar in Southern California, at like San Diego, I think was the town. Um, and it was the third day of a 3-day weekend, and it was the afternoon. We all had a dinner break, and I'd gone up half a block away. I had to climb under to get to Denny's restaurant because I didn't have enough money to pay for a fancy meal. I couldn't eat the meal. They had meals at the hotel we were at, but it was all I could come up with was for the money for the hotel room and the $400 for the seminar. So I was eating at Denny's. To get there, I had to climb under a hole in a chain link fence that surrounded Denny's parking lot, and because people from that hotel in the past had with wire cutters had cut a hole big enough for a person to crawl through to get in, to save going half a mile around to get to Denny's. So I walked over there and climbed through that hole, went into Denny's. We had a lecture earlier in the afternoon by a woman who was not a psychic, but she intuitive. She was highly intuitive, and she was at our lecture because this whole seminar was for people to develop their own consciousnesses, their own functioning, and so she had said, we walk past. I'm going to make myself cry again. We walk past every day opportunities, and we just bypass them because we're not paying attention, or we're thinking about something that's on our mind and not paying attention to what's going on around us. So anyway, was mulling in my mind as I ate my pancake dinner, um, and I'm thinking about what she said in her lecture, and she had paused her lecture for us to go to dinner, and then she was going to have two more parts of her lecture with a question and answer session after dinner. So, and this is in a big meeting hall where they take two large meeting halls and there's a accordion-shaped door between them. They pull that accordion-shaped door, and so they had like 1,000 people. What was that?
Oh, it's the battery on that one died.
So I finished eating my pancakes. We had 1 hour for dinner. It's now, I've got like 5 minutes to get back, and it's going to be a 3 or 4 minute walk back to the hotel. So I figure it's going to be perfect. I'll get there just as they start. Remember, her lecture earlier in the day had been about people walking right past, not paying attention to stuff. So I'm out in the parking lot. I'm walking between a big black, really expensive, like limousine kind of thing. It wasn't a limousine, it was just a big Cadillac or something, big black. And there's a woman standing by the passenger door on the front seat, and the passenger door was open. And I kind of went around her and started past, and as I looked out of my eyes, she's like 80 years old, and she's got tears running down her cheeks. And I walked on by, I went about 2 or 3 feet further, and I wasn't emotional, I was just normal. And I thought, wow, that might be, maybe that's something I'm supposed to pay attention to, based on what she'd said earlier. I thought, but I'm going to miss her lecture. I paid all this money to hear this woman talk. Oh, wow, and I had a real moral dilemma for a moment. I said, nope, I'm going to turn around. I said, I'll just miss it. And I turned around and I went back. I said, are you okay? And she said in a real shaky voice, she said, no, I'm not. I kind of opened my arms, and she came right over to me and leaned up against me, and I put my arms around her, and her whole body was shaking, and she said, I should just kill myself. And she was reaching in the glove compartment to get her revolver, and she was going to kill herself right there in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
And the reason she said she was intending to kill herself, well, I talked to her, and I said, actually, she had the gun. I could see the gun in her hand. I said, I saw that, and I said, do you need help? And she let go of the gun, and she backed up and turned around, and she's crying and shaking. And I said, that's when I gave her a hug, and she hugged me back, and she said, I should just kill myself. And I said, why? What's wrong? I'm dying, and I have a will that I've written, and I have three children, and I took them all out to dinner here tonight. They had come to her town from other places where they live with their family. They're all adults, 2 boys and a girl, or 2 girls and a boy, or something. And she said, I wanted to sit down and discuss with them why I was giving each of them a third of my income. And they got in a big argument in the restaurant over, she doesn't deserve that. She never did this for you, Mom. And Mom was trying to do equal, treat them all equal. But there was a big, each one was trying to say, no, I should get more than they should, or you know what I mean?
Right.
And she said, it got to the point where I said, the hell with you guys. And she said, I got up and I just walked out. They're still in there fighting over who's going to get what in my will. And so she said, this doesn't make sense, because if she's going to kill herself, then she won't be able to change her will.
I was just thinking that.
I did too just now, and I think somehow that wasn't an issue. She said,
or maybe she was gonna officiate the will and she had to change it yet or something. Or she was just so upset. Yeah.
No, don't search for the reason. The reason's coming to me. I think she hadn't yet written the will. She was discussing with them what she wanted to do.
That makes sense.
So she said, my attorney has instructions you know, what to do with my money if I don't give it to my kids or something like that. So she said, the hell with them. They don't deserve, none of them deserve it. And anyway, she was going to kill herself. So I talked to her for half an hour. Got her to promise she wasn't going to kill herself. I said, I'll be back in Cal. Remember, we don't have cell phones.
Right.
So I gave her my home address and telephone number in California. And I said, I'm not going to be back home. I don't know when, but I want to keep in touch with you. Is that okay? She said, oh, I would love to, Mr. Easton. Don't call me Mr. I'm Ron. So I'm Ron. And she said, thank you so much. And I said, listen, they'll work it out or they won't. And I said, but you don't need to kill yourself. You're going to die anyway soon. So. But I wanted to stay friends with her. So she thanked me. She was much more positive. And somehow in the process of talking with her, I had told her what kind of seminar I was at and the reason that I stopped to talk to her. And I said, so I'm missing the last part of her lecture. He said, wow, must be important. Who is she, or something like that? And I told her the lady's name. And she goes, no! And she scared the shit out of me. I said, what's wrong? And she repeats the name. I said, yeah. And she said, I have a PhD in whatever the field was. She herself had spent the earlier parts of her life touring the world. And one of the things she did when she was in Europe was she was a professor at a university there, and she conducted classes in which this woman was her top student, and her classes were teaching people how to do what this lady was giving the lecture was talking about. So she had been this lady's mentor when she was younger.
Oh wow.
So we stood there for another few moments, you know, just saying what an incredible incident. And she said, and this proves it, doesn't it? And we both laughed. I said, yeah. The reason I'm talking to you is because of something she said in her lecture, and she said that because of something you said in your lecture 50 years ago. So I go back, and when I get back there, the lights were dim in the big thing. The woman's up, she's talking on the microphone. Now remember, she's an intuitive. She senses things, and she acts on her. When she senses something, she acts on it. And she was teaching us all how to act on the things that happen in our lives that make your life so much more meaningful. So I quietly opened the door at the back of the thing. I'm not making any noise. It's one of those doors that you push a bar and the door opens.
Oh yeah.
So there's a little bit of sound.
A click.
A little bit. But it's a dark lecture hall. It's not pitch black, but it's dark enough that you can't see anybody. And she's talking, and the master of ceremonies who introduces her and who conducted the whole seminar that weekend is a guy named T. Harv Eker. T. Harv Eker is famous, was famous. He's almost my age now, a little younger than me. He had been, well, this whole seminar was on personal life development. And so he had invited this woman to come. She was someone that he had on his schedule. But he's sitting up there on a chair beside her. She's in a lectern giving her lecture. And she stops. She's in the middle of a sentence and she stops and she says, someone just came in. She says, sir, what's your name? And I went back there, and before I could say my name, T. Harv Eker stands up and he says, "Eastwood, it's you again. What are you up to this time?" All through the seminar, things kept happening, and somehow I was always involved in them, not intentionally. You know, he asks for volunteers. I put my hand up, and I go up there, and I'm the first person in several years that they had asked this particular question. I'm the first person that ever answered it properly. And he said, "That's incredible." He says, anyway, and it got to where the people in the audience, most of them knew who I was by my name. So as soon as he said, "Eastwood," he says, "Eastwood, it's you again. What are you doing this time?" And I did, or something. She says, "I want him to come up here." So he says, "Come on down." And I go down, and there's a lot of laughter. Everybody's laughing because once again, something's happening around me. And I'm feeling really embarrassed. And I go over to the side, and I walk up on stage, and I get up there. And she said, "You have a message for me." And I said, "Yes, I do, but I didn't plan to give it to you right now." She says, "It's okay. It's important." And I told her what happened. And she's got a little misty in her voice, and she said, "Oh my, I haven't seen her for 40 years or something." You know, she hadn't seen her college professor for 40 years. I only tell you this because this was an aside I took because of the way synchronistic things happen in my life, and it happens in everybody's life. Just most people just pass by it, and I really take seriously that thing I keep on my wall. It says, "Be realistic, expect a miracle." What I could also just as easily say, expect a synchronous event, you know, or expect a coincidence, which I don't call coincidences. They happen for reasons. I just think that's the way the universe is organized. Okay.
I think you're right on that too. I mean, that's what led us to this place here. The mold, or Alexis being sick, like all these horrible things. Now it gets to the point when something like messed up happens. I'm like, okay, what, I know something good's coming on the other end of it.
There's a reason.
So instead of being like, oh, everything sucks, I'm like, okay, what am I gonna get out of this? What either lesson am I gonna learn, or what different experience am I gonna have where I'm like, if this wouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have. Like if we would have never, got that Airbnb, we never would have met Carolina, then been over here. Like there's so many things like that. Just,
absolutely.
My life is full of them, basically.
I think most people are, and Chris, I think that's probably one of the reasons within just a few minutes of meeting you when you were working on something we talked about, I don't know if it was UFOs or what it was, but it was something where we had something in common. I thought, in my mind, what are the odds that some guy operating a septic tank truck, sucking out sewage out of my sewer, would happen by here right today and end up being, I felt like I'd known you for years. That we just had kind of similar personalities.
Yeah, we clicked and immediately started talking, and like we already we're very similar.
I don't ever write those things off anymore. So, and when you I think you went back east or something.
I was talking about we were going to possibly move to like Florida or something, but
that was it.
Then it ended up changing where we ended up like getting the RV and moving here. But
okay,
but that's what I was talking about when I was.
But
there.
I remember thinking, well, there's, it's too bad I'm not going to stay in touch with him. But look at that, I'm still in touch with you. So it's worked out. It's good. It's a win-win for both of us. And when I get a chance, it can be another day because she's not feeling good today, but we need, you and I, or just me and her, I need to talk to her because the things that are causing her the greatest amount of her physical pain doesn't need to be. So it could take a month for me to sit here and explain to you why. But I need to.
Yeah, she would like that. Man,
I need to share it with her.
Yeah, right. It's easier. It's better that way.
Okay.
And she'd probably prefer it that way, anyways.
Yeah. So, let's see.
So okay.
Martin Luther King is the topic.
Well, I didn't realize how deep this one story went. It's so deep, which is cool. I like it, but I'm surprised it's like all these little things tie back into a bigger story and just make the story even more compelling.
Well, and each one of these stories is just it's just an excerpt from my life, and since it's spread over other things, every one of them is going to have half a dozen other things in it. So that's why I say
That's what makes it so fun.
we'd have to take my entire life and have you watch the entire thing to get it all. But we're going to get as much as we, and that's why I like having people where they can ask me questions, or they can say, "Oh, Ron," I hate it when people call me Mr. Eastwood. "Hey, Ron, something like that happened to me," and then I get to hear their story, and believe it or not, their story may be what I needed to hear that day. They didn't need to hear my story.
Right.
My story was just the excuse for them to tell me theirs, and they needed to get that off their shoulders, and I needed to hear it because I gained from that. When I talk to you or your wife, I gain more than you think you get from me. I get from you guys, and we never know that until we try things. Anyway, so
I think you're saying I might have been confused, but I think did you leave off at the Venn diagram thing there and the son talking about how was that we left off or after that?
well,
I don't remember.
I kind of ended that.
Okay, that was ended.
It just meant that those kids were exposed from the time they were small as children. They were exposed to really high values in life,
Right.
about loving people and winning over their bigotry, their hatred, whatever, with their love. And the love always prevails. It always wins.
It always wins.
And I think, I want to say Edgar Allan Poe. It wasn't Edgar Allan Poe, but it was some other famous poet. It might have been Edgar Allan Poe. But he wrote this thing. It says, blah, 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 blah. But God and I had the wit to win. We drew a larger circle and drew him in, or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a real pithy saying. I wish I could find it. Anyway. Okay. So then from there, let's see. Well, because of my experience with them, when I ended up in Florida at some future time in the future, because I had lived with and chauffeured for Mrs. Martin Luther King and been her bodyguard for her children, kind of a bodyguard for her children. It wasn't a bodyguard that carried a gun, but I was trained by the Alameda County Sheriff's Department in crowd control, and I was back earlier, I was the manager for a small group of people that operated a bomb shelter that was dug deep into the ground in a park in the hills right above Berkeley and Oakland, at one of the regional parks. And to this day it's still underground, and there's very few people that know it's there. But it's fully stocked for about 500 people. 500 people could move in there, close the iron doors. They would be, it's impervious to an atomic bomb blast. You don't just go in, you go down. It's deep in the ground, and it's
Like in the mountains?
in the mountain, on the side of a hill, and a whole 500 people. It's self-contained, and I'm sure with modern, they probably improved the electrical systems and the lights and the air conditioning and all. It's probably not even used as a bomb shelter anymore. I have a feeling it's probably used as a training center for some other thing, because that was 40 years ago or whatever. At the time, we were in the it was the Cold War with Russia or something.
Is it on a base, or is it?
No, it's just in the middle of a public park.
Just hidden?
The regional park. It's hidden, and the reason it was in the public park is because it's up above. It's close, and what it was intended. It wasn't intended for just average families. It was intended for the mayors of 3 or 4 cities, the chiefs of police. You know what I mean?
Right.
The emergency rescue people. EMR, emergency technicians, all of that kind of people. In case of a bomb threat, they could get in there, and the whole purpose for keeping them alive was that after the radiation dissipates and bombings are over, someone has to be there to help reestablish society.
Right.
And this would be the key group: key government leaders, key medical people, key educators. They had books in there. They had, in other words, it was to make sure that human beings couldn't get wiped off the face of the earth.
Did you ever see the one? I think it was in Virginia on a golf course. I think it was Virginia. So they're building this. It's a big, elaborate like golf course, but like behind it was in plain sight. There's these like the walls actually open up. It's not secret anymore, but like the walls open up, and it was for the same thing, like all the government and all the people to come. But it was, they needed cover, and the cover was like we're building a golf course because they're moving all this dirt.
Okay.
But, yeah.
This is exactly what that was, and I was a shelter manager in that. Now, why was I telling you that though?
I don't remember, but it's a cool story.
Yeah, but that was connected to, let's see what I was talking about.
Oh, you said you were a bodyguard. You're trained by the
the sheriff's department trained me. Oh, that's it, because that particular bomb shelter was administered by the county sheriff.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why. I don't know.
So you got to like look around it and stuff too, and
Oh, we had practice sessions. And my job as a shelter manager was, if there were personal conflicts between, you could put 500 people in there. There's going to be someone say, "I'm in charge." No,
Right.
I'm in charge. I was trained psychologically to deal with those and nip them in the bud, so that we didn't have conflicts to the point where we would have chaos in our own. We're trying to preserve the best of humanity. We're not trying to allow it to take over. And anytime you put a group of politicians and mayors and people like that together, someone's going to feel like they're more important and their ideas are better than your ideas. And I was trained to make sure that
Did you have scenarios where like they'd have a bunch of people in there, like kind of, or is it more of just like if this happens, or did they actually bring people in?
We had training sessions. We didn't have 500 people, but
Right.
we would have 50 or 60.
You have to like de-escalate and all that kind of stuff. And
That's exactly what, to de-escalate and to, well, for one thing, the training I had in that shelter management paid off when I was in Selma, Alabama, at another time in my life, and the Alabama state troopers arrested a lot of us civil rights workers, loaded us onto school buses under arrest, and they all had sawed-off shotguns. These are law enforcement officers who their weapon is a sawed-off shotgun. The only thing a sawed-off shotgun can do is kill you.
yeah, blow a hole in you.
It blows a huge hole out of you. And they all had sawed-off shotguns, and we're scared to death. And we're all pacifists, so we're not violent. But they herded us onto these school buses, took us to the center of town, and in a driveway, and in between some large government buildings that went up 4 or 5 stories, there were like 65 or 70 of us. We filled 2 school buses, and we were about half white and half black. And a lot of clergymen and a lot of elderly people, elderly black people, and a lot of younger college students like myself, and white people and church people. And they herded us all there, and they lined us up in two or three rows, 20 people in a row. So there were about 60 of us, 3 rows. Now remember, I'm young. I'm 18 years old, 19, 20 years, whatever I was. But a lot of these elderly people were sickly. They walked with crutches. They were crippled. And they held us, and they wanted us to stand. Not if we sat down, we get shot. That's right. If you fall down or sit down, you better not let anyone fall down. If they're going to fall down, hold them up. 2 other, So, and that happened.
It's a form of torture.
Well, it's psychological too.
Yeah.
They probably, in retrospect, I'm thinking they probably wouldn't have shot us, but they could have, because they hated us.
Right.
And they had the backing of it was the state National Guard that was doing this. The local police were supporting them. Everyone there hated what we were. So if somebody had gotten shot, especially a black person, it would have just said, "Hey,
They came after us.
no." They probably would have lied and said they did something that deserved.
That's what I mean. Like, yeah, they attacked us or something that's not true.
Who knows what they would have done? Anyway, we were all scared, and my friend, well, it's a name I don't want to. It's the one I told you earlier.
Right.
He was another clergyman from the Central Valley here in California, but he was on one. He had a southern drawl, so he and I would go walking in the part of town where we would have been killed, but I wouldn't say anything, and he would talk with his southern drawl, so they just figured he was another member of the city.
Right.
You're a southerner. he's on one side of this woman. She's black. I'm on the other side, and she's about to faint. She says, "I'm gonna fall down. Don't let him kill me." So he took one arm, and I took one arm. For about 2 hours, we had to hold her up because she literally collapsed in our arms. You talk about, he was young and I was young, but that was one of the hardest things I ever did because I knew if we dropped her, we'd all get shot. At least I thought we would.
Right, yeah.
So it was scary. I was talking about shelter men. Oh, so what the result was, is the sun was setting and the sun was going down. They took us all inside the gymnasium. I guess this was in the back of a high school. By the way, the reason we were in this back alley was that way the helicopters and the news media and the people who were there for the civil rights movement didn't know we were there.
Couldn't see you.
We got there in school buses, and you know, as far as they knew, it was something, a school function.
Right.
The buses went around back of the school, and then we got out. No one could tell. I mean, we were just an assorted group of people. At any rate, we went in, and all the doors were locked, and the National Guard were outside the doors. And one of my training things in the shelter management program was to make sure of taking care of people's needs. So the first thing I did while all these people are trying to decide what we didn't have radios and telephones. What are we going to do? How long are we going to stay here? What are we going to eat? And some people had a little food. We decided to make sure the food went to the people who were the oldest or the youngest. You know, if there were some children, make sure the kids and the elderly women and people like that got the food. If there were a few candy bars, it went to them first. The rest of us would just be the ones that went without food. But what I did, I took a couple of the teenage boys that were with us. They were both black, and I took them with me, and I told one of the clergymen that was kind of in charge. There's no one in charge in civil rights. Everybody is just doing the right thing. But I took them with me, and it was a 3-story schoolhouse. So we went to every classroom, because these were classrooms that each one had a bathroom. So we went to the bathrooms in each classroom as we went up the floors, and we collected all the toilet paper, rolls of toilet paper. Or I think they were rolls. Anyway, the point is because we knew if we were going to be there for several days, people were going to have to go to the bathroom. And we didn't want someone using up all the toilet paper so everybody else didn't have any. So we put the toilet paper all in one place, and when we got back down there, and it was announced, I explained to them why. And then I announced that if you need to go to the bathroom, come see me, and you tell me how much toilet paper you normally need, and we'll give you just enough so that, you know, it might not be everything you normally, you know, some people might use 10 pieces of toilet paper. You get 3 pieces each or something like that. And we're going to allocate it because we don't know if we're going to be here for a week or a month or whatever. We don't want to run out of toilet paper. That was just something I learned in the shelter management from the sheriff's department, and it paid off later in the civil rights. And we never needed it because we all got released in the morning because Bobby Kennedy. So Kennedy had to have been the president then. Bobby Kennedy was the attorney general, and Bobby Kennedy dispatched today it would have been Homeland Security, but I can't remember. It was one of the federal agencies. And they came in and basically said to the Alabama National Guard, stand down, put your guns down and get out of here. We're going to let these people out. Or you're all going to get, you know, we're going to arrest you all. So the national government superseded the local government and the governor. Anyway, so
he rescued you guys basically.
Yeah, we got out, and then we all got to give, the news media got to interview us and we told them what happened. So that was just an interesting experience during my time with Martin Luther King, King's movement. I'm kind of running out of the...
We've been talking a while, so...
let's kind of end...
We could just end it here and, you know, pick up another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, you know what we could do, though, is, because I didn't do this before, is I'll just have a clip of you, like, saying, just your name or whatever, and then I'll cut that in and put it in the beginning. Yeah, do like, oh, my name's Ron Eastwood, or if you don't have to, but...
Well, you just did it.
Well, no, but I'm going to be editing it.
Well, take that out.
Yeah, that's all going to come out.
I don't want my name.
Or if you don't want your name, it doesn't have to be in there.
if I'd known, I would have probably said I don't want my picture either. I'll tell you why. Some of the things in here that I wasn't even planning on discussing with you, but there's things I've done, and the people that I've done them with would not be happy that I'm discussing the things I'm discussing. And
What do you think? You said it's like they offend them, or
no. I'm going to create a hypothetical thing and just say, read me into it. Just say,
okay,
it's hypothetical, but it does happen. Let's just say there's somebody who has worked in a very, very, very secret program with things that 99.99% of the people on Earth don't even believe exist, and knows things, and has been told, you and your family will die if you ever talk about this, okay? And so it would be stupid for that person to do that.
right? It wouldn't make sense for them to go and talk about it and put it online.
Yeah. So, anyway.
But they probably just stay away from this type of topics.
Well, yeah, I just said that there were things it's stuff that I've done in my life that I would not like. I'm not even going to discuss them.
Yeah, right. That's why I didn't ask about any of that.
It's my choice not to discuss them. You can ask me about anything. You can say, did you ever do something in this field, or do you have any information here? And if it's something I can talk about, I will. And if it's something I didn't, if it's something I did that I'm not supposed to talk about, and I said, no, I was never involved in any of that, so I can't I can talk about it with you in that terms. I said, no, never had anything to do with anything like that. Good question. I asked that question myself, and the truth might be,
Right.
I did have something to do with it, but I'm not going to talk about it
Right.
with you or anybody else. I don't want to die, and I don't have a family anymore. I've outlived all my family. I have a twin brother that's alive. See, even my twin brother, he kind of knows. He knows the dilemma I'm in, but he doesn't press me, and I don't volunteer stuff to him. So, for instance, let's say I died, and somebody thought I might have shared something with him because they know I've done something that they want to know about. If they contacted him, he could honestly at this point say, he's never said anything about anything like that with me because I haven't.
Right.
So
Even your brother doesn't.
I protected him and Judy when she was alive. I protected the people who need to be protected by keeping. That's not why I'm protecting this particular.
Right, just because someone you don't. Yeah.
He's
not like a public figure. You don't want to put his name out there.
He's a public figure where he lives, but if he or his family or his kids, because he's my age, saw this on the internet, they'd say, "Hey, Dad, did you know a guy named Ron Eastwood?" And he'd say, "Yeah." Why? Well, he's talking about you on the internet. Oh, he might say, "Oh, wow. Did he say how I could reach him? I'd love to talk to him again." Or he might say, "That son of a bitch. I didn't want anyone to know this."
He lived nearby or no? I heard you said there was a clergyman who lives in the general area.
At that time, he was a clergyman of a church in the Central Valley of California. That's all I know.
I was only asking because I thought, I was just wondering the last time you saw him or not. Like,
that was it.
oh, okay.
When we did Civil Rights.
Oh,
Movement.
so it's not like you've been in touch all these years or not?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
But let's put it this way. He's someone who I suspect would like to remain anonymous.
Right.
And until I have knowledge that it also might be, he might be like me. He might be saying, "Oh, Ron, I'm glad you're talking about these things." "Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can tell him," because I've got stories that he was involved in that I could share if I had his permission, but
Right.
I won't.
Well, the reason I asked, I thought if he was somewhere nearby, I think that could be like a fun little reunion thing there where you guys could tell your story together or something if you wanted to. I just think it's cool to document stories that were just disappear, that, you know what I mean, that are like...
Yes. Well, I agree. That's why I'm doing this. I think it's important. But more important even than my stories is for the people who listen to this to realize that each one of them have their own stories and could have the same kind of incredible experiences if they just pay attention to what goes on in their life every day that they just walk past or go by or don't think anything or think to themselves, "Oh, that's above my pay grade." No. If it's something you think about and care about, it's not above your pay grade.
Right.
And you don't have to go out and earn a PhD to deal with advances in consciousness. You just have to be open to listen to people who do deal with it and who can share it with you. Like I was saying, your wife, I'm sure, doesn't know the things I could share with her, but if I share them with her and she keeps an open mind.
I hope you guys liked that video. It was a ton of fun to make. I think next time we do it, we're gonna announce it and then go live so people can actually ask questions as we're doing the interview. But if you got this far, leave a comment down below and just say, hey, I've watched the whole thing, because that's the longest video I've ever made. It's taken me hours to edit. I mean, it was like a 4 or 5 hour video, so I've been cutting it down, trying to make it as reasonable as possible, but also I don't want to cut out any of these amazing stories he has there. So let me know if you've made it this far in the video by just saying I watched the whole video. All right, till next time, talk to you guys later.